Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The text arrived at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning in December, while I was in the middle of a board prep call with my CFO. I saw my mother's name light up the screen. I held up one finger to Marcus, muted myself and read it. Family Christmas this year is adults only, Aunt Patricia's idea, but honestly we all agree. She says having you there would kill the energy. You know how things get. We love you. Merry Christmas early. Below it, my father had added a thumbs up emoji. Below that, my sister Renee had sent 3 laughing emojis and then a snowflake, as if the snowflake made it festive. I stared at the screen for 4 seconds. Then I unmuted myself and said, "Sorry, Marcus. You were saying the Q4 projections. Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything's fine." I replied to the group chat with one word: understood. Then I set the phone face down and went back to work. My name is Diane Osemensa. I am 34 years old. I am the founder and CEO of Crestline Digital Infrastructure, a cloud architecture and cybersecurity firm serving mid-sized financial institutions across the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. We have 91 employees. Our last annual revenue was $47.3 million. We are projecting $61 million this fiscal year, which is why Forbes had called my office 6 weeks prior to discuss a feature they were running in their January issue, CEO of the Year Regional Spotlight. My mother did not know any of this. My father did not know any of this. My sister Renee, who had sent the laughing emojis, did not know any of this. And Aunt Patricia, who had apparently decided that my presence at Christmas dinner would kill the energy, did not know any of this. That was not an accident. To understand why I kept my life hidden from my family, you have to understand what my family taught me success was supposed to look like. My mother, Gloria, grew up in a household where appearances were the primary currency. Her mother, my grandmother Estelle, rest her soul, ran a tight ship. The right church, the right neighbors, the right shoes at Easter. Estelle had married a man with a government pension and considered that the ceiling of reasonable ambition. Gloria absorbed this completely. She married my father, Raymond, who worked 31 years as a mid-level administrator for the county water authority. Stable. Respectable. Invisible in the way that felt safe to her. Renee, 4 years older than me, had followed the blueprint perfectly. She married Derek at 26, a mortgage loan officer, pleasant, dependable, and they had a house in a suburb 20 minutes from my parents, 2 kids, a minivan, and a standing Sunday dinner reservation. Renee had a part-time bookkeeping job she called her little thing. My mother treated her like a saint. I had done everything wrong. I had left for Atlanta at 22 with a computer science degree and $8,000 in savings, turned down a corporate IT job at a regional bank because the salary felt like a ceiling I didn't want, and instead gone to work for a 2-person cybersecurity startup that collapsed 18 months later. My mother called that collapse a sign. "You could have had the bank job," she said. "I told you." I started freelancing. I picked up contracts. I spent 3 years learning infrastructure architecture in a way that felt almost physical, like learning a language by dreaming in it. In 2016, with a small business loan and a first client I'd cold emailed 47 times, I incorporated Crestline. The first year I paid myself $31,000. I ate a lot of rice and canned beans. I did not call home much. The second year was better. The third year I hired my first 2 employees. By 2019 I had 14 people and our first 7-figure contract. I did not tell my family. Not because I was ashamed. Because I had watched what happened when Renee's husband Derek got a promotion. My mother called 17 relatives. There was a dinner. There were toasts. And there was, underneath all of it, the unspoken implication. This is what success looks like, the right kind, the kind we recognize. I knew that if I told my mother about Crestline, it would be absorbed, evaluated, and ranked against the template she had already built. I knew she would not understand what a $4 million contract meant. I knew she would worry about whether I was stable. I knew Aunt Patricia, who had not had a kind word for me since I declined to be a bridesmaid at her daughter's wedding in 2014 because I had a client deadline, would find a way to minimize it. So I said nothing. I came home at Thanksgiving and Christmas when invited. I brought good wine and sat at the table and answered questions about the computer stuff, in ways that were technically accurate and completely unrevealing. "It's going okay. I stay busy. Atlanta's good. I had a full life they knew nothing about. The life they didn't know about looked like this. Monday mornings I ran 4 miles along the Beltline Trail before the city woke up. I had been doing this since 2018 when my therapist, Dr. Amara Osei, no relation, just a coincidence we laughed about on the first session, told me I needed something that belonged entirely to me, something that had no deliverable at the end. The running was that. Just movement and the sound of the city breathing. I had a standing Tuesday lunch with my friend and first employee, Keisha Tate, who had joined Crestline in 2018 when we could barely afford her and who was now our VP of Client Operations and the person most responsible for the fact that we retained clients at a 94% rate. Keisha was the first person who had believed in Crestline as a real thing, not a freelance arrangement with delusions of grandeur. She had told me once, in the middle of a brutal quarter in 2019, "You are building something. I don't need you to show me the finish line. I can see the foundation." I had held on to that sentence in the years since like a handhold. I had been in a relationship with a man named James Okafor for 2 years. James was a litigation attorney, calm, funny in a dry way, allergic to nonsense. He knew about my family. He had met them exactly once at Thanksgiving 2022, and had spent the drive back to Atlanta quiet in a way that told me he understood more than I had explained. He never pushed me to repair things I hadn't broken. That restraint was the thing I loved most about him. I also had a plant problem. 19 plants in my apartment, which James said was pathological and which I maintained was curated. I knew the genus and care schedule of every single one. There is something I find genuinely steadying about keeping things alive. These were my people, my rhythms, my life. The family group chat was a separate country I visited occasionally and left quickly. The Forbes call had come in early November. Their senior editor, a woman named Claire Whitfield, had called my office line and introduced herself and explained the piece. Regional CEO Spotlight, January issue, both print and digital. They had been watching Crestline's growth trajectory and wanted to profile the founder. The shoot would be in Atlanta. The interview would cover the origin story, the philosophy, the numbers. I had agreed. I had done the interview. The photographer had come to our Midtown office on a Friday afternoon and I had worn the charcoal blazer and stood in front of the window with the city behind me and tried to look like someone who had not spent a decade eating rice and wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. The issue was going to press the week after Christmas. Claire had told me they would need a final confirmation call in the last week of December to verify quotes and run the cover copy by me. She had my office number. She had my cell number. She had my assistant Priya's number. What had happened, and I did not know this until after everything, was that Claire had also, at some point during the initial intake process, pulled a secondary contact number from an old directory. The number listed was one I had used briefly in 2017 when I first incorporated, before I had a business line, before I had an assistant. That number was a personal cell I had since ported over to my mother's account when I upgraded phones and she needed a cheap line. So Forbes had my mother's phone number. And they did not know that. And neither did I. Christmas Eve fell on a Sunday this year. My parents' Christmas gathering, the one I had been uninvited from, was scheduled to begin at 4 in the afternoon. I knew the shape of it without needing to be told. The Good China, the playlist my mother had been running since 1998, Aunt Patricia holding court in the wingback chair nearest the tree, Renee's kids opening gifts in staged increments, my father carving the roast with the focused solemnity he brought to all domestic tasks. I was not there. I was in my apartment. James had gone to his parents' house in Savannah for the holiday. I had declined to join because I had the Forbes confirmation call and a board memo I needed to finish. He had kissed me goodbye Thursday morning and said, "Call me Christmas morning. We'll open something together over FaceTime." I had told him that was incredibly corny. He had shrugged and said, "I know. Call me anyway." Keisha had invited me to her family's Christmas, which I had almost accepted and then didn't, because I knew her family was loud and warm and I was not sure I could be in a room full of people who treated each other like they meant it without feeling something I wasn't ready to feel. So I was alone, which was a choice, and choices have weight even when they're the right ones. I had the Forbes call at 6. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my notes pulled up. Priya had emailed the quote sheet that afternoon. Everything was in order. At 6:03 Claire called my cell. We walked through the quotes in 20 minutes. Clean, no corrections needed. She confirmed the cover copy. She said the piece was strong, that she was proud of it, that she thought it would land well. She asked if I wanted a courtesy heads up when it went live. Yes, I said. Please. We hung up at 6:27. At 6:31, according to the call log I would later see, Forbes called the secondary contact number. My mother's phone rang in the middle of the Osei family Christmas, while Aunt Patricia was mid-sentence about something she had read on Facebook, while Renee's youngest was tearing into a box near the tree, while my father was refilling his glass in the kitchen. My mother answered because she answers every call. She was raised to answer every call. I heard about what happened next in pieces from different people over the following 48 hours. But I have assembled it now into something close to a complete picture. The woman on the phone, Claire Whitfield, Forbes senior editor, introduced herself pleasantly and explained that she was calling to confirm some details for the January issue. My mother said, "I'm sorry, who are you trying to reach?" Claire said she was looking to speak with someone connected to Diane Osa-Mensah, founder and CEO of Crestline Digital Infrastructure, regarding the CEO of the Year feature. My mother said nothing for a moment. Claire, assuming she had a bad connection, continued. She said they just needed to confirm one additional quote and wanted to make sure the subject was comfortable with the cover framing, specifically the line that read, "Osa-Mensah built a $47 million company in silence. Now she's ready to be seen." My mother said very quietly, "I'm her mother." Claire paused. Then professionally, "Oh, how wonderful. Is she available? We're just confirming final details for the feature." The room, according to Renee, who told me this on the phone 2 days later, voice strange and small, had gone completely quiet. The kids had stopped. Aunt Patricia had stopped. My father had come out of the kitchen. My mother said, "CEO of the Year?" Claire said, "Yes, ma'am. Regional Spotlight. January issue. It's a beautiful piece." My mother said nothing. And then, according to Renee, she screamed. Not in anger. Not exactly. Renee said it was a sound she didn't have good words for. Something between shock and grief and the specific, terrible recognition of a thing you cannot undo. My father took the phone. He spoke to Claire in a controlled voice and confirmed that yes, he would pass the message along. And then he hung up and stood in the middle of the living room holding the phone, and no one said anything for a very long time. Aunt Patricia, who had declared 3 weeks prior that my presence would kill the energy, said nothing at all. Renee said she just set her wine glass down very carefully and looked at the floor. My phone did not ring that night. I finished my tea. I read for a while. I had been working through a biography of Katherine Johnson that I had started in October and kept picking up and putting down. I fell asleep before 11. My phone rang at 8:17 Christmas morning. It was my mother. I looked at the screen for 3 full rings. Then I answered. Diane. Her voice had a quality I had not heard from her in a long time, stripped of the practiced management she usually brought to calls with me, the cheerful misdirection, the way she would fill silence with observations about the weather or Renee's children so we never had to sit in what was actually between us. "Mom," I said. Forbes called. It wasn't a question. "I know. They said CEO of the Year." "Yes." A silence. Then, "How long?" I knew what she was asking. Not how long had I been successful. How long had I known and said nothing, and come to the table and answered questions about the computer stuff, and let her believe what she had decided to believe about me. "The company's been running for 8 years, I said. "We crossed 40 million in revenue 3 years ago." She made a sound that was not quite a word. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her voice cracked on the last word. This was the question I had been preparing for in some form for years. I had imagined saying something clean and controlled. A version of the truth that was accurate without being indicting. But sitting in my apartment on Christmas morning with my tea going cold and 19 plants in their various pots around me, I found I didn't want the clean version. "Because you didn't ask," I said. "Not really. You asked how things were going. You didn't ask what I was building. You asked if I was stable, if I had a plan, if I was going to settle down. You didn't ask what I was actually doing." Silence. And I think, Mom, if I had told you, the first call would have been to Renee. And then to Aunt Patricia. And it would have become a thing that belonged to the family before it had a chance to belong to me. "That's not fair," she said, but quietly, without real conviction. She said it the way people say things they know are partially true. "I'm not trying to be unfair," I said. "I'm trying to answer your question honestly." Another silence. Longer. I heard her breathing. Aunt Patricia is very upset, she finally said. I almost laughed. Almost. About what specifically? She feels embarrassed. In front of everyone. Aunt Patricia, I said carefully, told you I would kill the energy at Christmas. She doesn't get to be the one who's embarrassed. My mother did not respond to that. Mom, I said. I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I'm not calling to have a fight. I'm telling you the truth because you asked and because I think you deserve the truth. I should have asked more, she said. Small voice. Smaller than I was used to from her. Yes, I said. You should have. We stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes. It was not a reconciliation. It was not a resolution. It was two people on either end of a long distance, measuring the gap honestly for possibly the first time. That felt more real to me than anything we'd managed in years. 3 days after Christmas my father called. Raymond Osei did not make phone calls easily. He was a man who communicated primarily through presence. Sitting in a room, being available, occasionally placing a hand on a shoulder. Words were not his primary tool. So when his name appeared on my screen on a Wednesday afternoon, I set down my coffee and answered immediately. Hi, Dad. Diane. He cleared his throat. I pulled up your company. I waited. 91 employees, he said. That's a lot of people. It is. Your mother showed me the Forbes article. Well, the draft she found online. The preview they posted. I hadn't known they had posted a preview. Hey, I said. You look like... He stopped. Started again. You look confident. In the photo. This was, from my father, a significant statement. I recognized its weight. Thanks, Dad. I told your mother years ago she was too hard on you. This was almost certainly not true in the way he was remembering it, but I let it go. She worried. That's her way of showing it. I don't know if that excuses it. It doesn't, I said. But I understand it. I'm proud of you, he said. The words sounded like they had been waiting a long time to be said and had finally found their exit. I should have said that more. Or said it at all. I'm not sure I ever said it. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the kitchen counter. Held on to something solid. Thank you, Dad, I said. That matters. We talked for 11 minutes. He asked about the company in genuine, curious terms. What did cloud infrastructure mean? Who were our clients? What was the hardest part? I answered him fully for the first time without abbreviating myself for an assumed audience. It was the best conversation I had ever had with my father. And it made me grieve quietly and specifically all the conversations we had not had. That was the cost of what I had built in silence. Not just the years of being dismissed or excluded, but the years when he might have been curious and I had not given him the chance because I had decided in advance how it would go. That decision had belonged to me. I had to carry that too. Renee called on New Year's Eve. Her voice had the careful quality of someone who had rehearsed and then decided to abandon the rehearsal halfway through. I sent those laughing emojis, she said. I know. I didn't, Diane, I didn't know. Obviously I didn't know. But I also didn't ask. I just went along with it. The way I always go along with it. Yeah, I said. That's not an excuse. No, I said. It's not. I think I was jealous of you, she said, and the words came out like they cost her something. Even when I didn't know what there was to be jealous of. You always seemed like you were going somewhere and I was just here. And it was easier to go along with Mom when she was dismissive of you because it made me feel less like I was standing still. I sat with that for a moment. I appreciate you telling me that, I said. Are we okay? She asked. I don't know yet, I said. I want us to be. But I need some time to figure out what okay looks like between us now. He accepted that. She didn't push. Maybe she had grown some herself in the past week. In the specific way that only humiliation and honesty together can grow a person. I didn't know. I was willing to find out. The Forbes piece went live January 9th. Claire sent me a text at 6 a.m. It's up. It's beautiful. Congratulations, Diane. I sat in bed with my phone and read it. All of it. There was a paragraph near the end that I had not quite anticipated, though the words were mine. Something I had said in the interview that Claire had clearly decided was the anchor of the piece. I built this in silence because silence was the only place where it was allowed to be mine. Not because I was ashamed. Because some things need to grow before they can survive scrutiny. I don't regret that. But I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I read it twice. Then I put the phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling for a while. Keisha called at 7:30, screaming in the way that only Keisha could scream, full-throated, totally unself-conscious. "We are on Forbes, Diane. Forbes. Do you understand what you did?" I said. "We did. Don't you dare make this humble right now. I need you to be excited for 4 minutes." I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that starts somewhere in the chest and doesn't ask permission. "Hey," I said. "4 minutes. James called at 8. He said simply, 'There she is.' 2 words. I felt them settle somewhere quiet in me. I went to the office at 9. The lobby had streamers. Priya had organized the whole team. 91 people, most of whom had no idea how any of this had started, all of whom had built something real with their time and their skill and their trust. I stood in the middle of the lobby and looked at them and did not cry, which took everything I had. Marcus made a speech. I made a shorter one. I said, "This is not the end of building in silence. This is just the moment where the silence becomes optional." Aunt Patricia called 3 weeks later. I almost didn't answer. Then I did because I was curious. "I want to apologize," she said in the clipped tone of someone executing a task rather than expressing a feeling. "I said something unkind and it was wrong." "Hey," I said. "Your mother told me I needed to call." "I know," I said. Pause. "You're not going to make this easy." "Aunt Patricia," I said, "you told my mother that my presence would kill the energy at a family Christmas. I'd like you to think about what it feels like to hear that from someone who is supposed to be family. I don't need an apology you were assigned. I need you to actually think about that." Silence. "I think," she said finally slowly, "that I have spent a lot of time deciding who people are before I've seen what they've become." It was more than I expected from her. Not enough to fix anything, but more than I expected. "That's a good place to start," I said. We hung up. I don't know what we are to each other now. I know I am not holding my breath. There is a moment in the weeks after everything came out that I keep returning to. Not the Forbes call, not the conversation with my mother, not even the lobby with the streamers. It was a Tuesday in mid-January, my standing lunch with Keisha. We went to the same place we always went, a Ghanaian restaurant on the west side that had been there since before either of us moved to Atlanta, and that felt to me like a place outside of time. We ordered the same things we always ordered. We talked about the Q1 pipeline and a new client prospect and whether Marcus needed a raise and whether Keisha's apartment building was actually going to put in a gym or just keep promising one. At some point Keisha said, "You seem different." "How?" He thought about it. "Like you're not braced for something." I turned that over. He was right. For a very long time I had been braced. Against dismissal, against the exhaustion of being misread, against the specific loneliness of being known partially. I had held my real life at a distance from the people who were supposed to love me, and that distance had kept me safe and also kept me sealed. I was not sure what came next. I knew the company was going to keep growing and that the Forbes piece had already generated 3 new inbound inquiries from firms we had been trying to reach for 2 years. I knew James and I were talking about what the next year might look like, and that the conversation had started feeling less like planning and more like deciding. I knew Renee had texted me a photo of her daughter's school project about women in business. Her daughter had printed out the Forbes article and taped it to the poster board. I knew my mother called every Sunday now. Short calls, still careful, still finding the grammar of a new kind of relationship. She asked about the company. He asked about James. She asked once haltingly if I was happy. I told her I was getting there. He said that was enough. I still run 4 miles on Monday mornings. I still have 19 plants, though I added a fiddle leaf fig in February that I am cautiously optimistic about. I still have Tuesday lunches with Keisha and dry humor from James, and the work, always the work. The specific satisfaction of building something that functions, that holds, that does what it promised to do. I did not forgive my family to give them peace. I forgave them, slowly, partially, with conditions I have not yet fully named, because I did not want to spend the rest of my life carrying the weight of their limitations as if they were my own. The silence was necessary. It was also in the end finished. I'm not bracing anymore.